Surprise! Um, this is an unscheduled video, but I was, let's say, inspired this morning. Um, I was reading one of my comments to my latest video, and this person was kind enough to leave a comment about one of the things they said was that Psalm 89 tells of his core failing. So that's referring to David Koresh. So thank you for your comment. And it's true that Psalm 89 is an important psalm if you want to understand some of the theology. Now, I will admit a bit of, I might be out of the loop here. In the sense, let me explain. So it's been 30 years. And so a lot of, that's a lot. It's one of the reasons why I started my channel, because it's been so long now that I felt we could get some perspective of history. I keep looking over here. I don't know why camera's here. Sorry. Perspective of history. Also, my voice is a little bit. Okay. So that's why one of the reasons why I started my channel on the 30th anniversary, so that we could start learning some history, getting some perspective. I thought that it was time. And of course, the history covers all kinds of things. It covers the theology. And this is an unscheduled video because this person turned my attention to Psalm 89, and that reminded me of something. Okay. Excuse me. Oh, man. Okay. Now, when this person tells me that Psalm 89 tells of his core failing, what I'm getting at is that I'm not sure, because I asked ChatGPT to summarize the chapter, it can be very useful. If you're not using ChatGPT, you should learn. It's a very useful tool. You have to use it with understanding and caution because it can make mistakes. But anyway, Psalm 89, I asked Psalm 89, what is it about? What is the protagonist's core failing? Psalm 89 is a lament that expresses the psalmist distressed over what appears to be God's failure to keep his covenant with David. The psalmist begins by extolling God's steadfast love and faithfulness, declaring that he will sing of them forever. He then recalls God's promise to David to establish his throne forever and recounts the many ways in which God has shown his faithfulness in the past. However, the psalm takes a dark turn as the psalmist laments that God has rejected David's descendants and allowed his enemies to triumph over him. The psalmist expresses confusion and dismay over why God would allow this to happen, given his covenant with David. The core failing of the protagonists, in this case, would be their lack of understanding or acceptance of God's sovereignty and the ways in which he chooses to work in the world. They seem to be struggling to reconcile their belief in God's faithfulness and steadfast love with the harsh realities of life, such as the defeat of their king and the suffering of their people. However, the psalmist ends the psalm on a note of hope, reaffirming their trust in God's faithfulness and asking him to remember his covenant and restore his people's fortunes. And then I asked for a sample verse that illustrates this failing. Verse 38, but you have rejected, you have spurned, you have been very angry with your anointed one. Which, if we go to the King James here, let's see, so verse 38, you have cast off and abhorred and have been wroth with thine anointed. Now, I don't know if the interpretation that the person who left the comment, if they mean that this explains what happened to David Koresh in terms of the fact that the ATF and the FBI, attacked and David Koresh was killed. Does that mean that this is some kind of planned thing of God, and then but don't worry, you know, there will be a future victory, right? I'm not sure. So maybe they could comment later. Or maybe they did comment another comment, and it was quite a bit of text there. I haven't read that yet. But anyway, so that's that. Just um, to try to understand what's being gotten at here. However, the reason why I wanted to make this video was because there was a verse here in the text that, excuse me again. Oh, got a little tickle in my throat. There's a text here. Thou hast broken Rahab in pieces as one that is slain. Thou hast scattered thine enemies with thy strong arm. So this is, of course, the part of the psalm where God is reminding. It's hot in here. The weather has turned, by the way. I'm not wearing my customary robe anymore, as you can tell. Yeah, because it's warm now. It's warming up pretty fast around here. So and I focused in on this this word Rahab. Okay. Now it says, "Thou hast broken Rahab in pieces as one that is slain." Now that reminded me of something. And so let's go back in time. So this here on the left hand of my screen is it's a transcript of a study that somebody else transcribed this, and then I have taken the text and added a bit to it. I figured out what the date was. That wasn't originally a part. Vernon Howell, because that's what he was at the time. This is New Mount Carmel Center, Tuesday, April 25th, 1989. This was Passover season, which was April 21st through 27th of that year. This is just a week before I was booted out. So, but I was there for this study. Okay. So you can find this online, maybe, I don't know, somewhere, if you want to read it. So specifically, we want to look at what did David Koresh teach about Rahab? Okay. So let's take a look here. So he says, "Now remember our study the other day. When God confronts the arm of the Lord, God says, 'Art thou not that which hath cut Rahab and wounded the dragon?'" And that's kind of like what's going on here in Psalm 89, right? Rahab is not doing well. God is, Now, the Bible student is fully aware that Rahab the harlot was not in any wise cut or wounded by any sort of man. For this woman, when time permitted, was to partake of the covenant given unto Moses. That is, the covenant that God told to Moses, all the nations that you shall come up to against, if they war against you, shall they destroy them. But if they shall proclaim peace against thee, and shall come unto thee, saying, We will serve thy God and be under thy yoke, then what was Moses to do to these nations? To bring them in, and they were to be as one of Israel, weren't they? Now Rahab the harlot, a champion, no doubt, for the service of Satan, in that any harlot would be, right? Rahab was given the opportunity by the situation and circumstance to show faith in the purposes of God, right? She knew well God's purpose was to give Israel the whole land, the land of Canaan, and by the example done unto Egypt, Rahab quit while she had a chance, didn't she? Power of the Red Sea. So he's referring to the Red Sea here. That's which is in Psalm, Isaiah. Awake, O Lord, as in ancient days. Red Sea being opened. Rahab quit while she had a chance, didn't she? Who can who convicted her of the impossibility of her having victory against these Hebrews? The Holy Spirit. Okay? Only the Holy Spirit can convict of sin. Um, when God confronts the arm of the Lord God, it art thou it that hath cut Rahab, wounded the dragon. Okay? And then, he talks about the dragon and everything. Okay, well, this is all true as far as it goes, except that it's wrong. Because there's another Rahab in the Bible that I don't think David Koresh ever knew about, based on my experience in the group. And I heard him talk about this many times. I found this transcript so I can quote him, and so I can show you what his teaching was on this. But it's wrong. And when I say it's wrong, I mean that he has made what I would call a technical error. A technical error meaning it's like an error of fact. Like if someone was to give you an equation, what's 2 plus 2, and you return 5, you make that kind of error. Okay. What he says about Rahab is true. Sure, I'm not going to argue with that. But when it says, art thou not it that hath cut Rahab and wounded the dragon, it's not talking about Rahab the harlot. And I can prove that. And I'm going to do that right now. Now, I was always suspicious of this because it doesn't fit. I was like, And then as you see here, we have another mention of Rahab in Psalm 89, right? Thou hast broken Rahab in pieces as one that is slain. So, again, David Koresh is fully aware that, Rahab wasn't actually slain, and so he has to do some interpretation. Well, she was by the Holy, whatever. You see what he says there. I disagree. Now, why do I disagree? I have to prove my case, right? So this would be exactly and precisely the kind of thing that I would notice and would be one little chink in my belief that David Koresh was an inspired prophet of God. Okay? David Koresh certainly admitted that he was a sinner, and he certainly admitted that he made mistakes and all that, and that's true. And so when I am telling the truth about, he did this or he did that, okay, fine. Like some people, who would still be believers, right? They would say, so what? Like, yeah, he said he was a sinner. Okay, fair enough. I agree. In this Psalm 89 here, if you follow the logic of, because I've talked about the Psalms before, it was his story. It's his biography. But when I would get into the details, right? Now we're getting down to the nitty gritty here. So that's what he accused me one time. To be fair, okay, his criticism of me, and this was a phone conversation. I actually have that on tape. I think I might post that someday. That I was straining at a gnat. Okay, David, you're too focused on the little things. Okay, well, all right, we'll see. I think little things are important, but maybe I'm wrong. Anyway, but this Rahab thing, I was like, wow, I think that he's made a mistake here. So it reminded me of Rahab, this Psalm 89. And I was like, well, let me explain. I don't normally want to do this, okay? And, if you don't want to watch, it's fine. No, there's going to be people who are going to find this like, oh my God, it's so boring. I understand. And if you don't watch, that's fine. Okay. But let's look at this. So you see what David Koresh has taught about this, okay? And it's Rahab the harlot. But, so now I'm going to read my presentation. I wrote this paper already, so I've already prepared something here. And I'll read it. If you read ahead, that's fine. So I have a paper called Who is Rahab? And I quote the verse, which we've already quoted. I'll read it again. Awake, awake, put on strength, O arm of the Lord. Awake as in ancient days, in the generations of old, as in the ancient days. In the generations of old, are thou not it that hath cut Rahab and wounded the dragon? Isaiah 51:9. Here Isaiah implores God to do the kinds of things that were done anciently. A rhetorical question is asked. Didn't you cut Rahab? When Vernon encountered this verse, he would very often ask the class, how did God cut Rahab? He asked this because God didn't actually cut Rahab. He saved her when he destroyed Jericho. So then you have to launch into a complicated explanation about how she was not literally cut, but spiritually, etc., blah, blah, blah. And you can see here, this is the blah, 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 okay? And I'm not trying to be disrespectful. I'm just saying that, you see here the type of explanation that he's given here. So you can see it here for yourself. Okay. I never really bought into it. It doesn't make any sense, and also why would the author ask God to do mighty things like he did in ancient days, and even mentions wounding a dragon, but then mentions some, excuse the language, okay, and this is, I don't mean any disrespect, this is context. Excuse a little whore who got smart and saw which way the winds were blowing, so she helped the Israelites. The next verse mentions more amazing things that God did. Art thou not it which hath dried the sea, the waters of the great deep, that hath made the depths of the sea a way for the ransom to pass over? And just to say, it's not that there's anything wrong with the story. Okay, that's not my point. It's a great story in the Bible about Rahab, and she was, she was a harlot. Of course, in the Bible, in the context, being a harlot is not the greatest thing in the world, right? It's not good. But, hey, she helped, and she was saved and all that, so that's fine. So it's not that I don't like the story or I think that whatever. That's not my point. Again, we're getting to is this the right Rahab? Is what I'm getting at. And so that's my point here is, okay, so the next verse talks about, well, like I say, it doesn't take a genius to figure out that this is a reference to the Exodus, okay, Isaiah 51:10, and even David Koresh mentions that over here, to be fair, because Rahab knew, the harlot Rahab knew that the Red Sea had been opened. Okay, fine, fair enough. Indeed, a great display of the arm of the Lord, of the strength of the arm of the Lord. Rahab, the harlot, just does not fit in here. Okay, in other words, what I'm saying is that if you are talking about slaying the dragon and cutting Rahab and doing all these things, and then, well, but it's just, there was this woman and she, I have a contextual problem, but it goes beyond that. I have more evidence. So the question is, what Rahab is being mentioned here? There must be another Rahab in order for this verse really to make any sense. And then I quote Psalm 87:4. I will make mention of Rahab and Babylon to them that know me. Behold, Philistia and Tyre and with Ethiopia. This man was born there. That's Psalm 87. When I was a kid, I watched Sesame Street. They had a segment called, Which One of These Things is Not Like the Others? well, we can play the game here. If we hold Rahab here to be the harlot who was saved, then yeah, she does not fit in here with all these mighty nations. Something is up with Rahab, right? Like Psalm 87, Babylon, Philistia, Tyre, Ethiopia, and then Rahab. You guys remember what I'm talking about? They would be Sesame Street. They divide the screen into 4 sections. You know, one of these things is not like the other. Please tell me before my song is done. And, you know, you'd be like, whatever. 3 guys would be like, you know, shoveling dirt or something. One guy would be, whatever, mowing the lawn, whatever. And it would, a little kid, you know, you'd be 4 years old. I remember this. And you'd be like, that one's, you know, that one's the one doesn't like the rest of them. You know, then that's what I'm trying to say here. You got Psalm 87. And really, Rahab compared, you know, like, this is weird. And then Psalm 89 again, which is the one that the person, the chapter they referred me to. Thou hast broken Rahab in pieces. We know what it says. We read it before. And it's, you know, wow. I mean, Rahab has just been destroyed. Ugh. More arm of the Lord imagery, more of Rahab being wounded and even killed. For this too makes sense in an application to our little harlot. You have to do some major biblical gymnastics. There has got to be a better explanation. All right. To solve this problem, let's take a look at how the names are actually spelled in Hebrew. Okay, so we're getting a little technical here. You can look this up in the Strong's. Okay, so in the Strong's, this is the Blue Letter Bible. If you don't know, it's very useful. So if you have a verse here, you can go to Tools, okay, and boom, here it is. So Rahab is here, okay. So here's the spelling. That's Resh, Hey, Bet. Okay, I know a little Hebrew. Don't be impressed, please. It's nothing. I don't know much, but I know the letters. So that's then you have the vowel points underneath. So because in Hebrew it's just the consonants that are the vowels are little lines underneath. Okay, so that's Rahab. Now you have to understand that that is a well, let's read. I explained. Anyway, that's what I'm using for this resource is these kinds of resources here. So there's this verse, you know, and there's Rahab right there. Okay, you know, let's try to speed this up. I'm going on too long. In Joshua 2:1, Rahab is spelled like this, and then I show here. That middle letter there is chet. So that's a letter. That's a sound that we don't have in English. It comes from the back of the throat, like that. There's the sound like that in German as well. Okay, we don't have that sound in English. So when you transliterate a name, so what does that mean? So to translate is to find a word in a language and then an equivalent word in English. So in Egyptian, for example, ancient Egyptian, the name for cat is ma'au. I'm not kidding. You can look that up. Ma'au. Okay, so the Egyptian name for cat is ma'au. Makes sense, right? And then, of course, in English, we call cat. I don't think it's modern Egyptian, by the way. It might be, but I found this a while back and I just thought it was funny. So ma'au, but in English we call it a cat. Okay, so. But transliteration is different. What you're trying to do is go into the word. So it would be Rahab would be Rahab. To pronounce it correctly would be Rahab. Rahab from here. Rahab. But you can't make that sound. That we don't have a sound like that in English. That middle letter is chet. There is no direct English equivalent. It is a guttural sound produced from the back of the throat. The closest approximation to use is H, right? Huh. But sometimes CH is used, which is ch, right? That would actually be a bit more accurate, I think. So should really be spelled Rachab to make it distinct, okay? Because that's the problem. In the King James, they look the same, right? That's the whole problem. Okay. In Isaiah 51:9, which is the one, the arm of the Lord, the one that Koresh quotes over here, Rahab is spelled, it's Resh Hey Bet. So that's only, see, there's only, this one is Resh Chet Bet. This one is Resh Hey Bet. So the middle letter is Hey, and in this case we have a very close equivalent to H. So in this case you would say Rahab. In Isaiah 51:9 you would pronounce the name Rahab. In Joshua 2:1 Rahab. So they sound different in Hebrew, is what I'm getting at. Okay, so there would be a distinction if you were talking about Rahab, the harlot, or Rahab, this here, then you would be able to tell. But in English you can't. This is one of the weaknesses of reading a translation of the Bible. This is the kind of thing that can get you. Okay. So the upshot of this is that the names are spelled differently in the Hebrew, but due to the limitation of the English language, they end up being spelled the same in the King James. So how can we identify who this not harlot Rahab actually is? Well, there is a verse in Isaiah 37 that can do that for us. Okay? For the Egyptians shall help in vain and to no purpose. Therefore I have cried concerning this. Their strength is to sit still. This is Isaiah 30, verse 7. Let's go to that really quick here. I want to show you Isaiah. So take a look here in your mind. See that right here? Okay, this string of text here. Resh, Hey, Bet. Here, Rahab. Okay. What was it again? Isaiah 30, verse 7. So let's go to Isaiah 30, verse 7. Okay, Isaiah 30. Here we go. So here it is, and we'll pull up our tools. So their strength is to sit still. Oh, there it is. Rahab. Right there. That's the strength. In this verse, see, well, here, maybe I explain it. Okay. So that's the verse. And it doesn't say in the Hebrew, in the King James, it doesn't say Rahab. It says their strength is to sit still. But a bit of an explanation is in order. In various languages, names usually have a literal meaning. David means beloved. Joshua means the Lord is my salvation, etc. Well, literally, Rahab means strength. So the translator at this particular verse interpreted it that way. But this is a mistake, or at the very least, it obscures what the text actually says. Isaiah does not think much of the Egyptians. He believed their help to be essentially worthless. So he cries out a phrase. Their strength is to sit still. But in Hebrew, it is Rahab Hem Shebeth. Okay? You read Hebrew backwards, by the way. So you read it this way. Rahab, Hem, Shebeth. That's Rahab, Hem, that's a Hey, that's a Mem, final Mem, Shin, Bet, and then TH. Oh, and I don't remember the name of the last letter. See, I told you I don't know Hebrew that well. Or Rahab, Hem, Shebeth. The word for strength there is actually Rahab. So one way to render it would be Rahab sits idle. The one I like is Rahab, the do-nothing. That Isaiah's making fun of Egypt here in this verse, Isaiah chapter 30, verse 7. He's saying, you know, those Egyptians are freaking useless, right? Their strength is to sit still, which is funny. It's like, you know, because that works too, right? I'm not saying the King James it says their strength is to, like, you know, that's funny. But it's actually Rahab Hem Shebeth. Rahab, the do-nothing. So this is the same Rahab that's in the other verses that we were talking about. Egypt It's Egypt. Egypt is Rahab. Now that makes sense, right? And when we're talking about Philistia and Tyre and Babylon, and, oh, Egypt. Yeah, okay, now it makes sense, right? Now it makes total sense that when the arm of the Lord is being called upon to do the great things that he did in the past, the victory over that dragon, Egypt, that sea monster, Rahab that was destroyed, that sea monster, Rahab that was destroyed, is being referred to. Not some little harlot in Jericho. Don't get me wrong, the story of Rahab the harlot is important. It just doesn't fit the context. So there you have it. Rahab equals Egypt. I like the NIV translation of Isaiah 51:9 particularly, as it accurately depicts the relationship between Rahab and the dragon, as they are the same thing. I have slightly modified the verse replacing monster with the dragon, though the best way to think of Rahab is a nasty mythical sea monster that represents Egypt and her power. Awake, awake, arm of the Lord. Clothe yourself with strength. Awake as in days gone by, as in generations of old. Was it not you who cut Rahab to pieces, who pierced that dragon through? So Rahab and the dragon are the same thing. It's because that's the way Hebrew poetry works. It will very often rhyme in terms of thoughts. Okay, not words. And you can look it up. Look up Hebrew poetry. It's the parallelism of thoughts. So it'll say, was it not you who cut Rahab to pieces? And then to say the same thing in a different way. Who pierced that dragon through? And if you study biblical poetry, you'll see this over and over again, how it'll repeat the same thought in a different way. It's really very beautiful in some cases. Okay, and then I say here, and this of course is Koresh, told me one time long ago that he had never been wrong. I have found instead that he had been wrong many times, but you just can't say it, right? If I just say, well, he's wrong, well, so what? That's easy. You have to prove it. And that is a tedious process, having to point out one mistake at a time in excruciating detail like this. Look how long it's taken me to explain this, right? We're like half an hour now. Okay, the question you have to ask yourself is, this is my rhetorical question. I'm not going to answer this question for you. This is the question, the person that was kind enough to leave the comment earlier. This is the question that I asked myself years ago. This is the question that we have to ask ourselves. And I can't answer this question for you. How many times does a prophet get to be wrong before they are not a prophet anymore? I don't know. Okay, that's it. If you're traumatized, I'm sorry. I apologize. I won't be doing this very often. But this, I thought that it would be interesting at least one time to go through the kind of thing that I used to do years ago. Yeah. So, I don't know what the reaction is going to be to this video. And this person that I'm talking about here, I mean no disrespect. I really don't. If you believe in David Koresh, that's fine. I don't have a problem with that. But these are the kind of things that I would think of. So anyway, let's just sign off for now. And maybe we can talk about some more things in the future if people are interested. I don't know. Till next time.